Welcome into Pigskin Perspectives. It is time to recap the weekend that was in the football world. Some very intriguing results going on around the football world, both in college and the NFL. Feel like we figured out some things about some teams this weekend. Some teams we left with more questions than answers. But here we are. We're going to try to make sense of it all and recap it right here. So, as always, we'll start with college football. Take a look at the six-pack that I gave you on Thursday. And I mean, most of these games lived up to the hype that I somewhat gave them. A few of them ended up being one-sided contests, but hey, can't win them all. The first of the six-pack I did give you on Thursday was the Red River Rivalry, Oklahoma, Texas. What a stunning game. Oklahoma wins it 34-30. Dylan Gabriel goes on I don't even know if it was a full minute drive. Takes him down the field, just over a minute left. Like I said, I don't even think it took him a minute to get down there. Leads them down the field, gets the victory for Oklahoma in this game. It's one of the games of the season so far. I won't go as far as saying it's the game of the year because I don't like those arguments, I guess, because everybody enjoys something different. So there's not going to be one unanimous, game of the year. But I will put it up there as one of the games of the year so far. Both teams, I think came out looking better than they did coming in. I know a lot of people had questions about Texas, their first real opponent after facing Alabama. And, they go out and lose, but I think they put up a real good fight. Oklahoma, this was their first true test of the season. They passed it with flying colors. Like I said on Thursday, I will not be surprised if we see this matchup again this season, given the Big 12 doesn't have divisions. So there's a very real possibility we see this game in early December in Arlington, Texas. And hopefully it's as good as what it was this time. Washington State traveled to UCLA in our second game of the six-pack. And, I mentioned that, Washington State came into this game ranked 13th, but UCLA was a 2.5-point favorite. At some point it was 3. Some points I saw it at 1.5, but UCLA was still the favorite no matter what. They go out and win this game 25-17 in a game not a lot of people saw because it was on the Pac-12 network, which I don't blame them. Nobody gets the Pac-12 network, which is one of the reasons why this conference is going to be kaput in less than 10 months' time, something like that. But UCLA came out and looked really good in this game. Dante Moore, the quarterback, true freshman, he still looks shaky at the starts of games, which completely understandable. He's a true freshman starting quarterback. But then once he gets in the routine of the game, he looks very good. I'm excited to see how this development plays out for him because he's only going to get better. And UCLA, if the Pac-12 was still going to be around during Dante Moore's tenure at UCLA, I would say that there's a chance that UCLA ends up winning the conference. With them moving to the Big Ten, I think there's just way too many moving factors, and I just don't think it's a true realistic possibility for them to win the conference. Alabama traveled down to College Station to face off against Texas A&M. They come away with the 26-20 victory in a game that was closer than I think people expected. I know a lot of people were high on Texas A&M coming into this game. I just didn't see it. They lost to a Miami team that doesn't look great right now, which we'll get to them in a few minutes. But Texas A&M just they're meh. They're meh. They always are every year. But Alabama sneaks away with the victory. I mean, I think they said this was the most penalties that a Nick Saban coached Alabama team has gotten in a game, and they still ended up winning, which is just incredible. I think there's still a lot more questions than answers with Alabama because Jalen Milroe, he's good, he's not great. I don't think he's going to win you games, but he will lose you games. They just don't seem to have a killer weapon like they always have on offense or defense, which I think is something we haven't seen from Alabama in a long time. But, I mean, they still only have one loss on the schedule. They are now in the driver's seat for the SEC West. And, I mean, anything can happen. I think the SEC West is a lot more open than it usually is because I don't think there's one true leader in the clubhouse. But I still think Alabama has the advantage here in this division. Georgia played host to Kentucky in a game that a lot of people were thinking were going to be close. I didn't really think so. I thought Georgia would pull away in the fourth quarter. Well, Georgia pulled away in the first quarter, the second quarter, and the third quarter, and the fourth quarter as they beat Kentucky 51-13. Last week I said Georgia doesn't look right. They still look like the number one team. They don't look good though. That was completely different this weekend. Their defense isn't as good as it was the past 2 years, but they still look very, very good. And I mean, that's all you really need. Like I said, this team, they looked worrying most of this year. I think they're finally turning that corner and getting in a groove, and they're going to start looking more like the Georgia team of the past 2 years compared to, what they are at the beginning of this season. So I'm not surprised by this result, but I know a few people are, I should say, and I don't think they should be, but they are anyways. Louisville played host to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's third straight primetime game. They're going for a fourth straight this week, which we'll get into on Thursday. But Louisville get a 33-20 victory in a game that they controlled start to finish. This did feel like a game Notre Dame was going to drop. You're playing too much with fire here, and it was just bound to happen. And I think that's kind of what caught up with them here. They're a good team. They're not great. We'll see in a minute. They dropped heavily in the polls, which I think is kind of warranted. But also the schedule, I think, is showing that Notre Dame isn't this amazing team everybody thought they were. I mean, going into the Ohio State game, they really didn't play anybody on their schedule, and everybody was very high on them, even though they really haven't faced anybody. So I think that's more of saying what this Notre Dame team actually is after facing some very decent opponents. And then finally, Fresno State traveled up to Laramie to face off against the Wyoming Cowboys in a game that was very close, kept going back and forth. It ends up being Wyoming getting the victory in this game. And, I mean, what a victory for Wyoming. I really wasn't sure going into this game. I knew Wyoming was okay. I didn't know if they would come out with victory here because I kind of just thought Fresno State would be just that little bit better. But they end up not being that. Wyoming gets the victory here, and Wyoming's starting to put itself in a position to get that group of 5 New Year's 6 bowl slot. They got a tough game, I believe, coming up this week against Air Force, who is currently undefeated. So there's a good chance that game ends up in the 6-pack. But I think those two teams right now, with the way they're playing, are very much positioning themselves for that New Year's 6 spot. So given that, we'll take a look at the AP poll, look at the changes for this week. So Georgia and Michigan are still 1-2. I think they'll stay that way until the end of the season because I really don't see Georgia dropping any games. Michigan could potentially drop a game somewhere, but I don't think that they would fall far from 2. They might drop to 3, but I think those two have just pushed themselves out in front of everybody, and the gap between 1 and 2 and then 3 and everybody else keeps growing each week, it kind of feels. Ohio State jumps 1 spot to 3. Florida State jumps 1 spot to 4. And then the big movers of the week. Oklahoma jumped 7 spots to 5. Obviously, you can debate if that's too high or too low, maybe. Maybe you think they should be in the top 3. I don't. I thought that they would end up around like a 7-8 spot, but they end up going this high. I don't really disagree with it, but it is what it is. 6, 7, and 8 remain unchanged, as that was Penn State, Washington, and Oregon. Washington and Oregon obviously facing off this upcoming weekend. There's a guarantee that will be in the 6-pack on Thursday, so stay tuned for that. Texas drops 6 spots to number 9. Kind of feel like 6 spots is maybe a little bit too much. I kind of figured with Texas and Oklahoma that it would be like Oklahoma 7, Texas 8. I didn't really expect that much of a gap between the two, honestly. I don't know why. I just didn't really expect it. USC drops a spot to 10. They are not good. The defense is costing them very much. I mean, they were lucky to get out alive. They had to go to 3 overtimes to beat Arizona, which, I mean, Arizona isn't a bad team, but USC looks bad. Caleb Williams, really good. Really, really good player. I think still one of the finalists for a Heisman this year. I don't know if he's going to win it. The team that's around him, they're not good. They're not. The defense is really holding them back. They have talent all over the field. It's just that they're not putting it together, and that's a big problem for them. Alabama stays at 11. North Carolina moves up 2 spots to 12. Ole Miss move up 3 spots to 13. Louisville had the biggest jump of the week as they jump 11 spots to 14, which is deserved, I think. Oregon State stay at 15. Utah jumped 2 spots to 16. Duke jumped 2 spots to 17 in the matchup that we just saw this weekend, or this past weekend, I should say. UCLA is at 18, Washington State at 19. Washington State drops a decent amount of spots. They drop 6 spots. And they are actually tied with Tennessee for that 19th position, so there is no number 20 this week. As Tennessee jumped 3 spots, even though they faced absolutely nobody this week, as in they had a bye week. Notre Dame drop 11 spots to 21, which I think they could have dropped a little bit more, but that's just me. LSU up 1 spot to 22. Kansas is at 23. Kentucky falls 4 spots to number 24, which I kind of think they should have dropped out, but that's just me. And at 25, we have the Miami Hurricanes, who dropped 8 spots, and they should definitely not be ranked this week, because I feel like we should mention the disaster that happened in Miami Gardens this weekend, with Mario Cristobal deciding not to kneel the ball with 30 seconds remaining, decides to run the ball, fumble the ball, ends up in a turnover with Georgia Tech getting the ball. Georgia Tech goes down the field, wins the game with a second left, and a lot of people have gone back into the archives this week and have kind of realized Mario Cristobal doesn't kneel the ball, which is quite odd strategy if you ask me. But I mean, you can't be making those plays. And yes, there's a very valid argument being made that the fumble shouldn't have happened because the running back's knee was down, which it was, but I mean, they didn't even take a look at it at all. So still, that was coaching malpractice. I think anybody I know that knows football is taking a knee in that situation. I don't get how coaches can get it so wrong and normal fans can get it right, I guess. It's just very odd if you ask me. But we move on. We'll move on to the Sunday League, the NFL. We'll start with the Thursday night game. The Bears got a 40-20 dominating victory. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I think a lot of people thought if the Bears were going to win, it was going to be close. They end up dominating this game from start to finish, which was just absolutely wild to watch. Moving on to the London game. For the first time ever, an NFL team played 2 straight weeks in London, and that was the Jacksonville Jaguars. And honestly, it looked like it worked for them, as they get a 25-20 victory over the Buffalo Bills, who looked jet lagged, like bad. They were very slow coming out to start the game, and it's almost like they could never get out of that. And it cost them the game, 100%. It was said that the Bills flew out on Friday, which whoever is deciding that is absolutely insane. You have to fly out earlier than that, because you aren't adapting in a 36-hour period, basically. You aren't adapting to that at all. And that cost the Bills the game. So they fall to 3-2 because of traveling ineptitude, basically. The Atlanta Falcons go on a last-minute drive to score a game-winning field goal to defeat the Houston Texans 21-19. Desmond Ridder remains undefeated at home as a starter. He is now 5-0. He's actually not, it's a stat that's going around this week, and I'm sure you've heard it by now, but Desmond Ridder has not lost a home game since college, or since high school, I should say. He went undefeated in college. He went to the University of Cincinnati, Nippert Stadium, always a very difficult place to win a game. Went undefeated there in his stretch as starting quarterback, and he's continuing that in the NFL. I don't think it lasts long, but it's still a very amazing fact, basically. The Detroit Lions, they start to finish, they dominate the Carolina Panthers 42-24. This is a very expected result. If you're the Lions, you should be winning that game by that margin. Given the opponent you're facing off against, that shows kind of, that's what they should be doing. I think, we look back at last year when the Lions were in the playoff hunt on Christmas Eve. They went to Carolina and they lost that game. This felt like if this was the old Lions, this would be a game that would be very close, that they would most likely lose. I think it's showing that the culture might actually be changing for once, and the Lions, might actually do something, honestly. I'm still skeptical, but I mean, their schedule really plays out for them. They don't truly face any outstanding opponents the rest of the season, which is insane to say. They're obviously going to drop games places, but realistically, looking at the schedule right now, I don't think there's a team on there that they can't beat, which is just astounding to say, basically. The Tennessee Titans traveled to Indianapolis to face off against their AFC South rival, the Indianapolis Colts, but it was the Colts that came away with the victory in this game, 23-16. But obviously, the bigger question coming out of this game was the health of Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson. He went down with a shoulder injury in like the second quarter. Gardner Minshew comes in, ends up winning the game for the Colts. And it's now sounding he's going to be the starter for the next few weeks. Gardner Minshew will be the starter for the next few weeks, as Anthony Richardson is going to be out with a shoulder injury for at least the next few weeks, is what they said. They really didn't get into a ton of details, but, it's awful to see him go down. But, I mean, the Colts might be a better team without him right now. I kept saying it's one step forward, two steps back with him. So maybe having like a quarterback that started games in the NFL, a veteran, might help. I don't know. They also got the news that Jonathan Taylor gets a 4-year extension. So he is back in the good graces of Colts Nation. So it's going to be interesting to see where this team goes from here, because the AFC South isn't amazing, and they could easily win the division. They could obviously easily lose the division. The Miami Dolphins faced off against one of the worst teams in the NFL. It is the New York Giants, and it was Miami coming away with the victory in this one, 31-16. The New York Giants got their first points in a first half this season, this week, which is another insane stat to say, but it happened. Devon Achane, the star rookie running back for the Dolphins, has gone out with injury. That was another question coming out of this game. It's looking like he's going to be week to week, which isn't great. He's been having a fantastic rookie season with the Dolphins, so it's going to be most likely Raheem Mostert stepping up, as he was kind of RB2 in that situation. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. The New Orleans Saints travel up to New England to face off against the Patriots and leave, giving the Patriots their first shutout home loss since the 1970s. This was the second worst loss of the Bill Belichick era, with number one being the one that happened last week. Things are quite rough in New England right now. They are not good at all. It's stunning to watch. Mac Jones, second week in a row, he gets benched for Bailey Zappi, and both of them are not good. They are not good at all. The Ravens and the Steelers face off in an AFC North showdown in a game that was a very defensive battle. It ends up with the Steelers walking away with the victory because they just find a way to win these games at home. It's just so mind-boggling because they should have lost to the Browns at home. They sneak away with the victory. They should have lost this game. They sneak away with victory. The defensive performances on this team are winning them these games. The offense still looks quite awful, but a win's a win, and you take them any way you can get them. The Cincinnati Bengals traveled to Arizona face off against the Cardinals. The Bengals finally look like they might be figuring it out as they get a 34-20 victory over the Cardinals. Joe Burrow looked better than he has this year, which is obviously I would say, a good thing for Bengals fans. Obviously, giving them that massive extension and then kind of just not looking good the whole beginning of the season. Finally looks like he might be starting to turn that corner. The Eagles remain undefeated as they defeat the Los Angeles Rams 23-14. I like this Eagles team. They are really good, but with another performance we'll talk about in a few minutes here, I think they've fallen to the number 2 team in the NFC. They're good, but I don't think they're as good as another team on here, which you can probably already guess which team I'm speaking of right now. The New York Jets traveled to Denver to face off against the Broncos. They walked away with a 31-21 victory in a win that was dedicated to their offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, who was obviously the head coach last year in Denver, only lasted the year. Obviously, there were words said by Sean Payton in the offseason about how it was one of the worst run teams he's ever seen. And here we are, and the Denver Broncos look atrocious. Russell Wilson is not the quarterback we all knew. He looks awful out there. I mean, the Broncos, they look worse than they did last year, which is saying something. Especially with the caliber of coach you have in Sean Payton, you'd expect something different, and they are awful. The Kansas City Chiefs sneaked away with a 27-20 win over the Minnesota Vikings, but obviously the biggest story coming out of this game is Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson is on the IR now after sustaining a leg injury in this game. With the Vikings now sitting at 1-4, it is not going right for them at all, which is not a good sign. I'm starting to wonder if we'll see Justin Jefferson again this year, honestly. I mean, why would you want to rush back to a team that's like 2-7 or 3-8 or something like that? Why would you want to rush back to that when you could just, sit the rest of the year with an injury and kind of wait to see what this franchise does at the quarterback position? Because Kirk Cousins' contract is up at the end of this season, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that. And then the team I was most impressed with this weekend, the San Francisco 49ers, remain undefeated. They not only beat the Dallas Cowboys, it was a rout. 42-10. The 49ers look unbeatable right now. They are a very, very good team. Excited to see how this team progresses throughout the year because, they look at their top level right now. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep it up or if they can find another gear and get even better, which I find hard to believe, but who knows? And then finally, the Green Bay Packers traveled to Las Vegas. They end up losing on Monday Night Football 17-13 to the Raiders. Just a all-around bad performance from the Packers in this game. Jordan Love threw 3 interceptions. He didn't look good at all. The Raiders kind of just fell into lucky spots, kind of, if that kind of makes sense. And they truly sneak away with the victory because they were kicking a field goal with a minute left that misses, and the Packers had the ball at midfield and could have scored a touchdown, but Jordan Love throws an interception in the end zone, and the Raiders are luckily get away with victory in this one. So given that, that is going to be it for this episode of Pigskin Perspectives. We will be back on Thursday for another weekend preview. Hopefully we will see you then. If you just stumbled across this channel and you like this video, hit like, hit subscribe. Tell anybody you know about it if you really enjoyed it. And we will see you back soon for another episode of Pigskin Perspectives.